Can you feel the tension in the air right now? I know I can.
Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about For a Few Dollars More. So I'm continuing my trend of Western movies, starting with Tombstone, and then the last video I did was Sam Raimi's The Quick and the Dead. And now we're moving on to one of my all-time favorites, and that is For a Few Dollars More. This is the second film in what is known as the Dollars Trilogy, or the Man with No Name Trilogy. Three Western films, spaghetti Western films that were created by Sergio Leone. These three films in particular are seen as being some of the greatest, most influential, not just Western movies, but movies ever made in general. Sergio Leone has gone on to be easily one of the most influential filmmakers of all time. He just really pushed the boundaries in terms of visual storytelling. And his sense of style, his sense of atmosphere and pacing, and his overall aesthetic has gone on to influence not just movies, but so much of everything in art and pop culture and comic books and video games and even anime. I mean, there is so much out there that takes influence from these three movies in particular. So the influence and the importance of these three films cannot be overstated. In the case of For a Few Dollars More, this is kind of the awkward middle child of this trilogy. Not awkward as in the filmmaking is awkward. This movie is exceptionally well made, but it's in a strange place in this trilogy because it's not often singled out in terms of these three movies. Like, everybody talks about The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's my personal favorite Western movie of all time, one of my favorite movies ever in general. So that movie is the one that often gets the most recognition in this trilogy. And then A Fistful of Dollars, because it was the first movie in this trilogy and it is the first spaghetti Western. I mean, technically there were other Westerns made in Italy before A Fistful of Dollars, but A Fistful of Dollars was really the movie that created the blueprint for what we now know as spaghetti Westerns. It was the first film that had this type of style, this type of filmmaking, this type of action and violence and performances, and this type of incredible film score by Ennio Morricone. It was the film that created the blueprint for spaghetti Westerns, and so that film gets singled out a lot, and it also gets singled out for being a unofficial remake of Akira Kurosawa's Yojimbo. I think everybody knows that at this point. And then there's For a Few Dollars More, which everybody who's seen these three movies, they know For a Few Dollars More, they love this movie, but it's not a movie that gets talked about as a standalone film. But I still maintain that you should watch these three movies like you would a trilogy, because from each movie, you see Leone grow as a filmmaker. Each film is better than the previous one. For a Few Dollars More, in my opinion, is better than A Fistful of Dollars for a couple of different reasons. Firstly, this is a completely original story. It's not ripping off, Akira Kurosawa or any other type of filmmaker. This is Sergio Leone going like, you know what? I'm going to make my own original story. I don't need to rip off other filmmakers. And so that makes this movie already an improvement off of A Fistful of Dollars, which is a movie that I absolutely love, but you got to give For a Few Dollars More credit for it actually being its own story. The film is much larger in scope. It's much more ambitious. There's more going on, narratively speaking. There's just more of an epic vibe. And then when you go from For a Few Dollars More to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, then you see Sergio Leone pretty much fully formed as a Western filmmaker, taking all of the strengths of the first two movies and just building on them and making the greatest Western movie ever made. I know some people say Once Upon a Time in the West is even better. I think there's an argument to be made there, but for my money, and for a lot of people's money, or dollars, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is the definitive Western movie and the greatest Western movie ever made. Similar to that of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, For a Few Dollars More focuses on three central characters. There's Manco, Mortimer, and Indio. Indio being the main antagonist in this movie, and both Manco and Mortimer being the two bounty hunters that are looking to go after him. At first, it's kind of a competition, and then they're like, you know what, we should actually work together in order to get this guy. Mortimer implies earlier in the movie that there's a personal reason why he's going after Indio. It's not just for the money. We find out what that reason is at the very end of this movie. Manco, who's basically playing a version of the same character in A Fistful of Dollars. Clint Eastwood. I mean, he's even wearing the same poncho. He's got the same getup, the same gun with the snake on the handle of it. It's just a different name, but you know what? It's fine. Similar to his character in A Fistful of Dollars, Monko is just about the money, is looking to make as much money as possible as being a bounty hunter, and then retiring and getting away from the crazy West. But in the meantime, he's hustling. He's hustling to get these dollars and to get out of town. And what makes this movie interesting, and what also makes The Good and Bad, the Ugly interesting for two similar reasons, is that this movie doesn't follow your standard 3-act film structure. The type of structure that this movie has in particular, and the same can be said with The Good, Bad, the Ugly, is that it's basically, it establishes our core characters. There is a plot throughout the movie, and then the rest of the film is just kind of a collection of scenes that are awesome and memorable, and that are all building up to an exceptional climax that is memorable and is satisfying and is just awesome as hell. He would really perfect this in particular in The Good and the Bad, the Ugly. In fact, it's really interesting watching this movie and seeing how similar both of those films have in terms of like the final shootout, the final standoff that ends both movies. And for a few dollars more, it's much more small scale. It's much more intimate. There's more of a personal vendetta going on there. But in The Good and Bad, the Ugly, it feels so much more epic and so much more ambitious. And the editing happening in that scene is just incredible. But for a few dollars more is basically kind of a trial run to the final shootout in The Good and Bad, the Ugly. They're very similar. They're even standing in like a similar like ring. So with Monko, he's playing basically the same character as his previous character in A Fistful of Dollars, Clint Eastwood. It's the same type of performance. He's just awesome, cool, low-key, has that awesome, iconic squint. More or less, he's basically doing the same thing. Mortimer, played by Lee Van Cleef, who would also be the bad in The Good and Bad and the Ugly. He's playing a similar anti-hero character where he's not a bad guy, but he's also not necessarily a good guy. There's really no good guys in these movies. I think that's what makes these three films really iconic and interesting in comparison to previous Westerns, like with John Wayne, for example. Sergio Leone really established that anti-heroes are a much more fitting type of protagonist in these type of films. But Mortimer is a similar character to Clint Eastwood in that he is a good guy technically, but obviously he does some bad things in order to survive in this hellish landscape. And he is a much more calculated bounty hunter who's relying much more on like the latest gear and guns. There's kind of an interesting contrast going with how these two bounty hunters operate. That's kind of interesting. There's a great scene between these two where Clint Eastwood wants to get this guy out of the way so he can go after Indio to get this crazy $10,000 bounty. And their introduction scene is pretty awesome. The whole pacing of it, the shootout, the way he keeps shooting Mortimer's hat. And then Mortimer's like, oh yeah, and he shoots the hat right off Clint Eastwood's head. And oh my God, there's so many great scenes in this movie. It's kind of insane. But they realize that they have a similar goal in that if they're going to take on this huge job, because they're not just going after Indio, but Indio has a crazy big gang that are also crazy gunslingers, that they realize if they're going to succeed in this particular mission that they need to work together. And Mortimer has a personal reason why he's going after Indio, and then that leads into Indio, who for my money is the most complex and memorable villain out of all three of these films. He is a standout. It's the same actor from A Fistful of Dollars, but his character in this movie is so much more haunting and just kind of weird and creepy, and there's something also really sad going on there. So Indio is a very evil person, but does have some sort of morality or remorse because he has this pocket watch that has kind of this haunting chime with the picture of a woman's face on it. And we see through flashbacks that he saw this woman and she was with her boyfriend or husband or somebody, some significant other. He shoots him to death and he forces himself on her and she ends up committing suicide. And this moment in particular has haunted Indio for his entire life, essentially. And he looks like a man who is just living in a nightmare that he can't wake up from. He's evil And he's merciless. I mean, the way we get introduced to him is his gang breaks him out of prison, and then he goes after the bounty hunter that caught him in the first place, and he orders his men to shoot his wife and his baby child off screen, and then he does a duel with the pocket watch chime, and when the chime ends, that's when you draw, kills him, and you're like, oh my god, this guy's an evil, evil dude. But yet he's haunted by his evilness. It's like he's cursed to be evil, and he knows there's no redemption for him, so he just chooses to continue to be evil because he's basically doomed because of his evil past and because of this particular moment with this woman that has just haunted him for life, basically. And then we find out that the girl that he forced himself on, that committed suicide, was the sister of Mortimer, and we find this out at the very end of the movie. It's kind of a fun little twist. The movie doesn't foreshadow this too much. I mean, there's one moment where Mortimer suggests that this is kind of a personal thing, but we don't realize how personal it is until we get to the aftermath of the shootout, where Mortimer shoots Indio after Clint Eastwood intervenes and has his pocket watch, and that's how we realize there's a connection. He stole Mortimer's pocket watch, which is the same one that Indio has, that has the same chime on it. And that's the moment we realize, I'm like, oh, there's some sort of connection between that haunting moment with Indio and Mortimer. And while for the most part, all of these movies, I mean, you can watch them as pure escapist Western popcorn entertainment that are just fun and entertaining and just exceptionally well made and directed on every single level. And of course, the score by Ennio Morricone just elevates all of these movies to even more epic proportions. There is some complexity in these films. There are some interesting themes that Sergio Leone isn't hitting you over the head with. He's telling you these ideas visually, and then it's kind of up to your interpretation what they mean. It's the classic example of a director showing you instead of telling you. Sergio Leone has actually said in interviews that his movies are heavily influenced by silent films, and that the dialogue is just kind of a means to an end, but he's more about the visual storytelling more than anything else, and that's what makes him such a special filmmaker. In this movie in particular, you can see the growth from him as a filmmaker between this movie and A Fistful of Dollars. A Fistful of Dollars is still an awesome movie and really, really enjoyable, despite the fact that it is a pretty shameless ripoff of Yojimbo. But nevertheless, Sergio Leone proved pretty quickly that he could have his own original story and ideas and execute them to an insane level of art that is just incredible. I mean, there's a reason why these three movies are still widely recognized as being three of the most important movies, not just Western movies, but movies of all time. And For a Few Dollars More is a movie that deserves to be singled out because there is some interesting story complexities there that make it feel interesting. So that's my thoughts on For a Few Dollars More. I absolutely love this movie. I love all three of these movies. They kind of ignited my love for Western films. It really starts with these films, and then I would go on to appreciate the genre even more because of them. But I want to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on For a Few Dollars More? What are your thoughts on the Dollars trilogy as a whole? Which one's your favorite? Mention it in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching.